Hi, good morning.
Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Hey, Carrie.
Good morning, Tony.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Great.
Good. I am going to remind you to make me a co-host.
Ah, yes. Thank you.
Thank you. And my internet has also been wonky lately, so if you interrupt me, if you notice me like stuttering,
like freeze. If we do the freeze.
It's not performance art. It's the internet.
Yeah, great. I got recording is on.
Wonderful.
So that's good.
Good. I'm gonna enter in a couple last minute questions that we got into this outline.
Great.
There's a lot.
There's some great questions.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great questions, huh?
Yeah. We're covering the whole topic today.
But you could just, it just really shows how little information is like out there in a clear way, you know?
There's nothing. And, you know, I was having a conversation with a coaching client about this yesterday. Like, it's the schools, it's not, they don't have the resources to devote to like making this understandable. So their attitude, I think, is a lot just like, get it out there so it's out there and then people will figure it out. But it's really hard to do that especially when you don't have a frame of reference. So
I mean, I'm in the field and some of these questions, I'm like, whoa. Like, I mean, imagine if this is how people had to learn how to drive, is just like, like
there would be a lot of accidents, a lot. Trial and error driving school.
Yeah.
It would be a nightmare. I'm gonna try to go ahead and pin us. Can I do that? Yes, I can. There's me, and then here's you.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
Great.
So we can dominate the conversation.
Awesome.
Yeah, we've got a lot of ground to cover. Oh my goodness. But I'm excited. This is going to be a really good conversation, I think.
Yeah.
And it's helpful too, I think. Oh, that was the other thing I wanted to get. I wanted to get the link to the video. Since we're focusing specifically on MFT today, I wanted to put the link to that YouTube video we made about other licenses. Yeah, I want to drop that in the chat. Let me find YouTube. There we go. No. Okay, here we go. Dropping in the chat right now.
Great.
Where's my up carrot? A video we did covers the differences between licenses. Why can't I spell licenses right now? There we go. Isaiah, quick question. Yeah, what's up, Isaiah?
Since the meeting is supposed to go just a little bit longer than what was previously scheduled, will there be a like Q&A that you'll put up in the chat box that we can reference later? Or I know it's being recorded. Will we have access to this for something later if we can't stay for the full time?
Yep.
Yeah, we're going to post the recording on the Sentio YouTube channel. So I am going to go ahead and drop that link also in the chat. Hold on, if I go straight, actually.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, you betcha.
Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right. So yeah, for anybody who can't stay the full time, or if anybody, like, we are seriously gonna be covering so much ground today. And so if you feel like you want to come back and watch this again or watch parts of it again later, I've just dropped a link to the Sentio Institute's YouTube channel in the chat. Go ahead and click that and subscribe to the Sentio Institute YouTube channel. You will get a notification when the recording of this gets posted. And we're also working on a series of other videos answering like the most popular questions, the ones that seem to come up again and again. So we'll be doing videos there. So go subscribe to be notified. I am going to draconianly mute everybody.
Bam.
Boom. Oh wait, I muted Tony. I know. I muted you again.
Oh,
like
I didn't, when I made you co-host, I didn't realize I was creating a monster, a power hungry monster.
No idea what was about to happen.
Oh, Ben should have warned me.
Oh, he's been trying. He's tried. Well, what do you think? Should we get started?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Let's dive in. Hey, everyone. My name is Carrie Wida. I am the application coach at MFT California. Thank you guys all so much for joining us today. This is our intrepid co-host, Dr. Tony Rumenier. Tony, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Tony Rumenier. I'm a psychologist in Seattle and very happy educational partner with Carrie Wida.
And today we are going to be focusing on going into a career as an MFT. We're going to be focusing specifically on the MFT license, and we're going to mostly be focusing on getting an MFT degree in California, mostly about getting licensed in California. We are going to address a bunch of the questions that came in about portability of the license, taking your license to different states or trying to get a degree in another state and then getting licensed as an MFT in California. We're going to address some of those, but we are mainly focusing on this. If you are interested in other tracks, like other licenses, we do have a YouTube video where I covered kind of what the big differences are between the different options. I dropped that link in the chat. Can I do that again? Actually, Tony, would you mind maybe dropping the link in the chat again?
This is for the YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, YouTube channel. There's also, if you go to just do that one. If you go to the YouTube channel, then you will be able to see the videos that are up there right now. Our old webinars up there, and the video on the different licenses is up there right now. Go ahead and make sure you subscribe to that YouTube channel, because we are going to be posting the recording of this video to that channel when we're finished with it. And then we're going to be working on a series of other videos focusing on like big questions that people typically have. So stay tuned there. But yeah, today we are going to focus on MFT. So we had hundreds of questions come in, and so I am going to try to cover as much as we can of the submitted questions. We're hoping that will take about an hour, and then the second hour will be answering any of your questions that come up here live. So
Carrie,
yeah, go ahead, Tim.
Let me just remind everyone, we are recording this webinar and we're going to post it in its entirety on YouTube. So if you have to, cut out early or if you miss any portion of it, you'll be able to catch it later if you subscribe to the YouTube channel. And I believe the chat does not get saved as part of the recording. So whatever you put in the chat won't appear in the recording. But if you say anything during the recording, you're going to become, a YouTube star.
If only it were that easy. Well, so why don't we kick things off with a kind of broad question that came in. I think, Tony, you would be, for all y'all who don't know, Tony's an expert in this field, and I think there's no one better to speak to this than you. The question was, what makes for a successful therapist? Is it different personality types, learning styles, career backgrounds? What do you think?
That's a great question. So what Carrie's referring to is I've done research and some writing on the topic of therapist expertise. So what helps us become better therapists? Because I noticed in my own training, even though I was trying really hard to become a better therapist, my skills were not improving as quickly as I wanted to. And something I noticed in graduate school was kind of a disconnect where my ability to think about therapy and talk about therapy, write about therapy, what kept going up. Like I could write really good papers about therapy. And if you asked me about the therapy I provided, it would sound very sophisticated. But then if you actually watched videos of my therapy sessions, which I was recording for training purposes, it was like a whole different story. And so I got really, really interested into digging into how can we improve the speed, the efficiency, the effectiveness of therapist training. And I started reading the research literature and it turns out that becoming a better therapist is actually surprisingly similar to becoming a better performer in many other fields. Like, how would you become a better athlete? How would you become a better musician? How would you become a better chess player? How would you become a better pilot? And the short answer is you'd practice, right? Like I'm sure many people here have played musical instruments. Some of you might have even played professionally. And if you want to get better, you practice. There's no other way around it. There's no like super shortcut. There's no like secret. You just practice, right? It's the same if you're an athlete. And as people are professionals, they keep practicing. If someone, becomes a member of the symphony or someone gets hired by the NBA, they're not like, oh, I made it. Now I can stop practicing. And so it turns out it's the same for therapists, that we are as good as we practice. And so there's a bunch of us working on developing exercises so therapists can practice more effectively. I'm actually going to put the website here in the chat where you could, because we're posting these exercises for free on our website. We're hoping the whole field starts to adopt them. And this is something, since I know a lot of people here are considering applying to MFT graduate programs soon, or you might already be applying, is to ask the graduate, show them our website and ask the graduate programs how much rehearsal, how much deliberate, it's called deliberate practice. How much deliberate practice will I get in your program? You can ask admissions people. Ideally, you're able to ask faculty at the program and see what they say. And we suggest picking programs that offer the most opportunities for practice.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. Yeah. And I would say, like, from my personal experience, like, the only people who aren't going to be able to do some sort of therapy are people who, like, I think just don't like being around people. You're going to have a hard time in this field if you don't like being around people. But other than that, there's so many things you can do in this field. And what Tony is speaking to is, like, even no matter, like, a huge part of what you do when you enter this field is figure out what you're already great at and where your growth edges are, and then trying to systematically improve in the areas in which you're not as strong as you could be to benefit your clients. But the nice thing is it's not some mystical thing where you're either like a good therapist or not. Everyone has a different level of expertise and different aspects of doing therapy. And I mean, if it was as easy as, like, we know what makes a good therapist, there would be like a recipe out there for you to follow, but there is not. So what Tony's describing is really what I wish I had in my graduate program. Had a little bit of it, but the reality is, like, the programs are kind of like really behind the 8 ball a little bit on like adopting these principles. And so the more that students can go into these programs and say, actually, this is something that I really want in my education, the better it's going to be. And that's the way we're going to, like, really change MFT education. So all right, well, like, let's dive into the nitty gritties. I've divided this into like 5 or 6 categories because we've got a lot of questions. If I don't get to your specific question, I am so sorry. Make sure, like, stick around to the end, ask it at the end. We are going to dive into starting with the career, overall, the career of an MFT, being an MFT. We had a question: what do MFTs do? What are realistic expectations for clients, paperwork and billing, work options other than therapy, job perks, burnout, work-life balance, and ability to expand interests. So good news, having a degree in marriage and family therapy means you can do a whole lot of things. Just the degree itself means you have a master's in psychotherapy and counseling of some kind, typically and specifically marriage and family therapy. It does not mean you are a therapist yet. It doesn't mean that you are a licensed provider. You do have to do all of the other things to jump through the hoops to get the license. But having that degree does open you up to other options beyond getting licensed and being a therapist, although that is typically what most people do. So most people go into the field as MFTs wanting to become a practicing therapist, and you typically go into either community mental health, healthcare settings, like you're going to go work full time at a clinic somewhere, or they go into private practice. I'm simplifying, but these are like the big areas. And it really there's no one answer. This career can really look like whatever you want it to look like. You can work with whatever clients you want to work with. There's a lot of compromising between what kind of lifestyle you want, what kind of a workload you want, what kind of clients you want to work with, how hard you want to work at, like, say, building your own business, especially if you're going into private practice. But so realistic expectations in terms of clients, anything from like severe mental illness all the way up to, angsty teenagers who don't want to do their homework. I mean, like it's the full gamut. You can and will run into everything. Paperwork and billing. If you go into community mental health, especially if you are at an agency that is contracted with DMH, the Department of Mental Health, paperwork becomes like a special skill. And there are some graduate programs that actually, like mine, CSUN, they have a mandate to get people into community mental health, and they will actually train you in doing this paperwork in the grad program. Most programs, I would say, don't really go that far. But yeah, paperwork is super heavy in community work. It's a lot. And that actually is what contributes to burnout a lot of the time. It's different in private practice. It's less onerous. You are still required by law to keep notes on your clients every single time you meet with a client. And it is something that therapists can get disciplined over if you aren't keeping your notes. But the paperwork is not as intense as being in a community agency. This changes a little bit if you're working with insurance, and in private practice, you can choose to work with insurance companies or not. I would say most private practice therapists opt out of working with insurance companies, especially at the master's level, like as marriage and family therapists, because the insurance companies don't reimburse master's level clinicians at a very high rate. I've heard in my area, Los Angeles, around $60 to $70 per hour. And that's even if you can get on the insurance panel. So, but if you're gonna take insurance, then there's a little bit more paperwork there for sure. There are billing companies that will do that billing for you. But again, it's like running a small business. Your work options other than therapy, again, you can go into a lot of different things. You can go into teaching, you can go into working in the schools, you can do coaching if you want. There's a lot of options. I would say oh yeah, Tony.
Oh, I just wanted to add, one of the cool things about becoming a therapist is you can actually switch between these different options every few years. So, when I was just working with individual adults when I started, and then I started working with couples, and then I started getting into research and, and teaching, and you can just keep moving around. So it's a career that'll grow with you for, your whole life.
And that's what I love about it too. It's really expansive, and you can do whatever you really want. Again, that can be a little intimidating for some people because there isn't really like a clear path to success. There's no guarantees. It's very much you make out of this career what you put into it. Juliana, I see your question in the chat, and I'm going to get to that when we get into choosing a program. Don't let me forget that. So how has the pandemic changed the field? Okay, we're in the middle of an enormous explosion of online telehealth, online therapy. We're seeing coming into the field these online companies like Talkspace, BetterHelp, that are doing strictly online therapy, and they're really changing how people perceive therapy, I think. remains to be seen, like how, like what all happens. I know so many therapists I know can't wait to get into the office. A lot of therapists are going to stick with telehealth forever, only telehealth. So it's changing, but there is also an explosion of people seeking services. It's amazing, but also a lot of them are trying to use their insurance to see a therapist, which again is tough because not so many therapists actually take insurance. So remains to be seen how that will all play out.
Yeah,
therapists say it's a low. Oh yeah.
Sorry, can I just add one last thing?
Please.
Yeah, there's a severe shortage, a critical shortage of therapists right now, and MFTs, or master's level therapists, of which MFTs are really the kind of therapists that that everyone's trying to hire.
Yeah.
So they're the most in demand.
Absolutely. And again, that's like for just like in a private practice settings, but also in other healthcare settings as well. Therapists say it's a lonely job. How do you cope with this? It can be. That's why I think one of the most important things you need to do as soon as you get into the graduate program is to start building your professional network. Because yeah, if you just go to school and you do what you need to do to graduate, and then after that you're like, okay, now I need to find a job. It can be tough. It's like if whenever you're trying to find a job in that manner, it's a little bit of like throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? Whereas if you can develop a professional network, that can really lead to much better opportunities, but also mitigate some of that loneliness. What therapists are talking about is like, once you go into practice, after you're fully licensed, you don't need to be supervised anymore. It could, and often is, you alone rent an office and you go see clients there every day. And it's entirely possible to like never talk to another therapist. And because of confidentiality issues, you can't really talk to other people about what you do a whole lot. So it can feel very isolating, I think, for a lot of people. I feel like that was one of the things that I loved about my program, was I was able to form really strong friendships with the people in my cohort that continue on after graduation. I formed some really great relationships, which is something else that we will talk about, but also those connections led to friendships, support. I can turn to these people for case consultation, but I can also turn to them for, career things. Like if I'm looking for a new job, I have immediately a bunch of contacts I can reach out to. So that, I don't know, Tony, would you say like mitigating loneliness in the profession?
Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, let's remember, like as therapists, it's a very social job. Like our job is helping people. Usually we're helping people with challenges that they have had for a long time, that they've already asked their friends for help. Like often we're the last stop on the train. Like they really have exhausted all their methods. And when you're able to help someone who really needs help and who really values your help, it is so satisfying. I mean, it's just magical. Like I feel so lucky to have this job. I mean, it's amazing. And that is a social experience. That is like a peak social experience. And so I just to, keep that in mind. But yeah, if especially in private practice, it can be isolating. I've worked, there's plenty of agency jobs, there's University Counseling Center jobs, there's lots of jobs in teams. And so there are plenty of ways to, I mean, at least half the therapists I know work in teams one way or another. And so there's plenty of jobs like that. And so it's about finding the kind of niche that feels right for you. And remember, you can always change as your career progresses.
Exactly. Okay, I hope that answered that question. Danielle, you're asking, I attended the MFT program at Cal State Northridge in like the Los Angeles area. What type of work can you do as an independent contractor? I'm assuming, Juliana, you mean like other than like not therapy work. So as an independent contractor, like you mean on the side, you like literally, I mean, I guess your imagination is the limit. Once you have a master's in marriage and family therapy, you are considered more of an expert in mental health issues. So I suppose I've had a friend who got hired by a startup It was a therapy startup, but I love to work with them. A lot of therapists do like website, like copywriting, that kind of stuff on the side. Yeah, like anything, a lot of different stuff. Okay, so let's talk about job prospects as an MFT. One of the questions we got, how long does it take to build a full client load? So this is after you graduate, but before you're licensed, you're what's called an associate in California. So you must be supervised by a licensed professional. And this is whether you're in private practice or whether you're in an agency setting. To build a full client load, so what that means is typically therapists need to get their own clients somehow. In an agency setting, it's nice because you don't need to worry about that. The clients are coming in and your supervisor delegates them to you. And so they just come in your door, you get a full caseload. Now, in an agency setting, you can see like 20 to 30 clients a week. And then you also have a ton of paperwork on top of that. So you're working like 40 to 50 hours a week, typically working with more difficult populations, harder populations. And so burnout can be very high, but it also means that you're collecting your hours super fast. You don't need to do any hustling for clients yourself. You never need to worry about making sure you're getting enough supervision hours, any of that. So if you go to the community agency route, as soon as you like step out of graduate school, you can have a full client load. If you're trying to get into private practice, this really depends on like so many factors that there's like no good answer to this question. Honestly, usually it takes associates at least a few months to get any clients at all. That's because you're trying to find a supervisor to work for. You're going through the onboarding process. You're waiting for your associate number. You have to like register with the BBS, the board that like regulates our licenses in California. So you have to wait for that paperwork to process and get your number. And then you are essentially starting your own small business. Now, if you are able to find a supervisor after graduation who is hiring associates because they have an exploding caseload, because they have a waiting list, that's the best situation because that supervisor is hiring you to take on some of the clients they can't be seeing. But typically, at least in my experience from what I've heard, that's rare. More often, supervisors are taking on associates as a way to expand their practice. And so what they're hoping for is that you will come in and be willing to really hustle and build your own client load and bring more and more clients into the practice. And the supervisor won't have to do that marketing work. If you're going into private practice, you really do need to at least not hate marketing because it is like just developing any small business. Nicole, you're asking, what is a salary like for an associate typically? Again, all over the place. If you're going into a community agency setting, in LA, I've seen everywhere from like 40 to 60, could be closer to 70 if you have a specialization, especially if you're bilingual. Again, that depends on what kind of setting you're going into, who's funding it. DMH funded typically have a lot of money. But again, they have to pay that much because you're doing a lot of work. But so that's kind of where you could start. And then if you're going into private practice, in the Los Angeles area, it changes across the state, but not a lot. In the Los Angeles area, I would say that private practice clinicians can typically charge around $100 an hour for therapy, with a wide range on either side, but that's typical. But if you, as an associate, typically you are splitting that fee with your supervisor. Getting into employment law in California that I don't want to waste time on right now, but we can talk about that at a different time. Tony, did you want to weigh in on that?
Not on California employment law. There's a question about WASC accreditation, which I can handle when we get to that.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Yeah, that would be awesome. I'd love to hear what you say about that. Okay, so that's about and so to how long does it take to build a full client load in private practice as an associate? Really hard to tell. It can take up to 6 months to get your first client, or you could start seeing clients right away. And again, how much you're making really depends on what fee split you're negotiating with your supervisor, what the hourly rate is that they're paying you for non-therapy stuff like supervision, writing notes, that kind of stuff. It's not a lot to start with. So if you really are set on going the private practice route and coming out of school, that's what you want to do immediately. It would be good for you to have a supplemental income coming in at least here, I would say the first year-ish. Whether that's a partner or family member who can support you, or whether you have a full-time job already, like a previous career, that I would advise that. But I have a lot of classmates who didn't have those options, went straight into agency work. You get a salary, you get benefits, you get job experience, and they're pretty close to licensure now because they worked a lot.
Yeah, I would just reinforce that. Like, if your goal is to get up and running and licensed as quickly as possible, joining an agency or a university counseling center or community health center or something like that is definitely the way to do it. You're also going to be surrounded by senior colleagues and supervisors who are going to be able to give you tips, help you network, develop a specialization, really like all the things you'll want in your private practice to be successful. So I typically recommend that path unless someone is like, okay, I just want to work part-time for, a few years and gradually ease into it. Maybe, I have kids, or, I am taking care of my parents, or who knows what. Right. In that case, yeah, sure. A private practice, 5-10 hours a week, is fine as long as you're not depending on it to support like you or your family.
Exactly. And then that leads into the next question, which is how long does it take to get licensed? If you are going the agency route, like I said, like I had a colleague who did her practicum at an agency site. She went right into a paid position there after graduation. She worked full time at this agency job for about a year and a half. And then now she's segueing into private practice, and she's about to get her license, complete her hours. So it took her about 2 years after graduation to be able to get her license. Me, gonna take a lot longer than that because I'm not currently seeing clients right now. But yeah, so like I'm choosing the route of like going into private practice right after graduation. I literally just graduated. So it's going to be longer. You have in California, you have 6 years after you first start earning hours before you start losing those hours. So I would say most people get licensed somewhere between 2 and 5 years in California. Can a person start a private practice with LMFT or LPCC? Yes, you can with either or both of those. Beginning earning potential versus after being licensed for 5 years. I would say that the length of time you've been licensed, where that really like translates into monetary anything, is in an agency setting where you're going to get bonuses over time, you're going to be promoted over time. Or insurance reimbursement. A lot of insurance panels, you can't even get on the insurance panel unless you've been licensed for 2 years. So if you are wanting to go into private practice, but you want to do an insurance-based practice, you're going to be looking at like, a lower salary until you can build up your practice the way to fill it with insurance clients. But if you're going into private practice, you're really, it's not a build over time for every person. It really becomes a matter of you really dialing into who you are as a clinician, who you want to work with, how you're going to get your message out there, how you're going to get clients in the door. If you've never done this before, it might take you some time to figure that out. If you're coming from a career where that's what you've been doing for 20 years, it'll be easier for you to kind of jump into that sort of environment. Is it hard for young MFTs to build a consistent client base in a private practice? I think what I'm hearing in this question is a concern about like appearing youthful or, being taken seriously as a young person in MFT. I'm sure some people will tell, and I'm sure a lot of professors will be like, yes, it's impossible. In fact, I think I've heard professors say that. I strongly disagree. As someone who has looked younger than I am my entire life, I actually don't, it really comes down to being strategic about how you present yourself as a clinician and what your focus is going to be. I mean, like if I was trying to do therapy and I wanted my niche population, the people I wanted to work with were like Fortune 500 executives, that might not go over well. I might have an uphill battle. But if I wanted to start working with kids, people are probably going to be more inclined to trust me on that. So please don't, for whoever asked this question, don't listen to the people who are like, they're gonna tell you, oh, clients aren't gonna trust you because you're young. I don't believe that for a second.
Yeah, so I'm now, significantly into my second half of my life. And so there are definitely young people that won't trust me because I'm old. And I just also won't understand what they're talking about. They're going to be talking about like TikTok or something, and I'll be like, oh, is that like CNN? And and so like everyone has a niche, everyone has, people who like they understand. And so that's your job, is to target your niche. And I guarantee you have one.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so what is the earning potential for an MFT in California? We already kind of covered this. What kind of job or position would make the highest salary? So this is a steady job kind of route. Getting higher up in an agency setting is going to end up paying more. It's going to start paying more like a corporate position somewhere, because largely the higher up you go in community agencies, the less client contact you have, the more it's really a corporate job. So I would say that's like steady, like sure money if you want to go that route, but that is it's going to take you longer to work your way up in that. I think there's a lot of money, again, not my area of expertise, but I think there's a lot of money in rehab facilities, but I know that that's hugely controversial in California right now. Who knows how long that will last. Honestly, the therapists that I know who are making a bank, like who are making a really good living, are private practice therapists who have settled on a target population that can afford and is willing to pay for expensive therapy. It sucks because it does affect like access to therapy, right? Use not as much therapy, cheap therapy, affordable therapy is hard to come by if you're looking only at licensed private practitioners. But I have a colleague who does, it's brilliant. She does in-home concierge child therapy. And it's here in LA, and there are some very expensive parts of LA, and she charges $400 an hour. That is like, yeah, that's bonkers. Like that is by far the highest rate I've ever heard, but she gets it. I've heard like typically like a couple of my professors have shared that they charge like $200 an hour, and they could charge more, but they deliberately keep it lower. Because like when the economy starts bottoming out, therapy is one of the first things to go. So especially if you're charging a whole lot, and it can be seen as a luxury service. But if it's more affordable and relatively more affordable, people will stay in. So therapists have found that that's a way to like maintain their client load like over time through insecurity in the economy. But yeah, it's if you're coming into this field and I like, you will find some people will shame you for wanting money. I feel very strongly about that because it's not therapists' fault. We live in a capitalistic society, and I like money because it makes life better. So you will get pushback though. You will get pushback from a lot of people in the field. So prepare yourself for that. But if you want to, like, if making money is important to you, either working your way up in agency things or dialing in to like the right client population as a private practice therapist, start now. Start figuring out who you are as a clinician, who you might want to work with, making connections in that area, because you'll make it easier for yourself after graduation. Okay, so now we're gonna like take a little detour and we're gonna cover licensing, state regulations, and how it affects the license or program you choose. Getting a lot of questions about this, and it's you're asking a lot of questions because it's a very complicated nonsense topic. It is so hard to understand. So I'm going to give an overview of the whole thing, and then maybe answer some of these specific questions. So there's a YouTube video that we made. We dropped a link in the chat. This covered more in depth the different kind of licenses. Essentially, though, just what you need to know is that license like MFT is regulated at the state level. So every state has a different way to become one of these license holders. And sometimes they even have different names for it. It's crazy. But it makes very little sense. But so of the 3 master's level licenses of MFT, counseling, LPCC, like a professional counselor, sometimes it's called an LMHC, licensed mental health counselor, whatever. And then there's social work. They're mostly do pretty much the same thing. There are more MFTs in California because that license started here. For a long time, it wasn't a nationwide license, but now all 50 states do have the MFT license. But the rest of the country largely focused on social work and counseling licenses. But it's just kind of intermixing now at this point. However, the social workers, professional organization, lobbying entity were way more successful historically at getting what's called reciprocity across state lines. So that means that if you're licensed in this state, it's easy-ish to become licensed as a social worker in this other state. That means it's a more portable license. MFT, not so much. What you're going to come up against if you go to a California MFT program and you get licensed as an MFT in California, and then you want to take that license to another state, what you're going to do is you're going to end up doing a lot of paperwork to prove that you have met the new state's requirements. You may also have to take another exam because in California, we have our very own MFT licensing exam, and the entire rest of the country uses the national exam. So usually one of the conditions of transferring your license is that you will have to take the national MFT licensing exam as well. Now, this is a question, can I get a degree out of state and then come back to California to become an MFT? You could try. It depends on a bunch of things. So in California, the way it works is the BBS is our licensing board, the Board of Behavioral Sciences, and they set all the rules and regulations for becoming an MFT. They have decided in the state of California, they don't really care what the accreditation is of the MFT program. They just want to approve it. And so they've approved a certain number of programs to grant the MFT degree in California. If you go to one of those programs, get your MFT degree from one of those programs, you will qualify to sit for the licensing exam in California. However, if you're going to school in a different state and then you're coming in here, your school's not going to be on the BBS's list. So what you're going to do is you're going to be applying for your associate number as an out-of-state applicant. That means that you're going to have to do some paperwork and apply for your associate number and probably try to prove that the school you went to, were it in California, would have been approved by the BBS. This is why I say save all of your syllabi that you ever get. You're going to need it to prove equivalency. So sometimes it's easier to go to school in a different state, get your license in that state, and then transfer to California, but can still be a headache. If you go to school here and then try to get licensed in another state, it can be crazy. Sometimes it's easy, sometimes it's not. It sounds like if you go to school in California and then Tony, you want to weigh in on that?
Can I jump in? Is that okay?
Please do.
Yeah, so just to explain the context a little bit, California, the California state legislature has created laws which it thinks are really good for California, but many other states disagree with. And I'll give you examples. California, I think, was one of the first states or the biggest state to pass laws to limit auto emissions. And car manufacturers in all the other states had to start changing how they're making cars in order to reduce auto emissions. And California has done that with a whole bunch of different industries, including licensing therapists. And so if you go to school in California it's really important to make sure to check, like if you want to work in another state, to look up the laws and regulations in that state. Now, the other way around usually isn't as hard. Would you agree, Carrie? Like if you get trained in another state, it's easier to go to California than the other way around.
As far as I know, yes. I feel like not a lot of people do that, but
Right.
yeah, it tends to be easier.
Yeah, so rule of thumb, stay in California.
Yeah.
Like you just keep going left as far as you can in the country. And when you hit the water, stop.
You're good. You're good.
And you stay
Don't
there.
move. I mean, so it is kind of a nightmare. There's a lot of things to think about. The way I would reduce it for a lot of my coaching clients is, my first question is, do you have any plans on moving out of the state of California at any time in the future? If you're like, yes, and I'm gonna maybe move to Michigan, great. The first thing you need to do is look up the Michigan regulations for LMFTs. And then you're going to figure out from there what program you have to go to, all that kind of good stuff. If you're like, I might want to move at some point, keeping my options open, but I'm not sure where I go, it's a little bit tougher. We're going to get into accreditation in a little bit here. For those people, I might say maybe give stronger consideration to a COAMFT program, because the COAMFT accreditation can make it easier in some states to transfer your license. In California, we don't care if your program is COAMFT accredited. They'll give you the MFT license anyway, but that's not true for all states. But what was the third thing I was going to say? I think that's it.
I think that's good.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated issue, and it's not your fault. You don't understand. It's really a nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay. So can you get licensed for anything nationally? No. As far as I know, there is no, nothing, not even doctors really. You have to get a state specific license. It sucks. Somebody asked what should applicants do if they eventually want to practice in California and another state? This is a great question, because this is impacted by telehealth, the telehealth thing that's happening. So our legally, therapists in California can see clients who are physically located in the state of California. If the client takes a vacation to Arizona, you cannot see, technically, you cannot see that client while they are physically located in the state of Arizona. You would need to contact the Arizona board and talk to them and see if you can get a special exemption to see this client who is a California resident, but is currently in their state. And it's just a nightmare. Nobody does that because it's really to contact the boards. But if you and your client are in California and then you want to go on vacation to Arizona, you can still see your client as long as they're in California. So what some people have been doing as telehealth explodes and people are getting more comfortable with the idea of online therapy, they are getting licensed in multiple states. This is especially true on the East Coast, where there's very small states all next to each other, so that they can serve a wider geographic area. They get licensed in all of those states. And I'm seeing that more and more, people who are licensed in California and then get licenses in other states that they don't live in, just so that they can see clients in those states. So that I think is that's not been typical, but I think that is going to become more and more a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm licensed in California, Washington, and Alaska, just because I've moved around a bit.
Awesome.
And I held on to the licenses, so it costs maybe $100 a year or something, but you can keep them active.
Yeah.
And there is a chance that states are going to open this up and make it easier. It's called license portability, right? To make that easier in the future. We just don't know how long it'll take.
Yeah. Before we move on, I'm just going to skim through the questions really quick. Jackie, you asked, are there part-time agency positions available, or is this rare? In my experience, I have not seen a lot of part-time agency positions. They might be out there, but they're probably not out there to see clients, like for therapists, because they're typically full-time positions.
Can I answer a quick question there? I think there's an important question at the bottom. Jenny asks, is it true that COAMFT accreditation is needed to work with veterans or the government? So the The way I would answer that is some jobs do require COAMFT accreditation. And so it'll be in the job description. Now, I know plenty of people that work with veterans that don't have COAMFT, accreditation. They just work at jobs or in private practice. Like, you could be in private practice, you could definitely work with veterans. And, the veteran doesn't ask you if you went to a COAMFT school. The veteran doesn't know what COAMFT is. So it's really job by job by job. And so what I would suggest doing is, this is a good exercise to do anyways, is pretend you're a licensed therapist and search for a job. Just go on the internet and search for jobs for therapists, like in your zip code, in your area, and just look at the job postings and look at the requirements, and you'll see what kind of thing they require. Because there's some areas where none of them will mention COAMFT, and then there's some areas where they'll take it seriously. So.
Yeah, my understanding is that for a long time, MFTs were not able to be hired by the VA, the Veterans Administration, but social workers were. And this led to a very common wisdom thing you'll hear is that social workers have a lot more options for career paths, things they can do than MFTs. This goes back to social work being historically an older license. And so people have to have MFTs, I think, when they were writing their job descriptions. And government bureaucracies like the VA are very slow to change. But I do know that it changed recently, like in the past 5-10 years, something like that. So MFTs now can get hired at the VA. However, there is a limit, from my understanding, don't quote me on this, but there's a limit to how far they can get promoted, whereas social workers don't experience that same thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and all this will be changing going forward. So if you enter school this year, it'll be, at least 3 years before you're applying for jobs. And so the master's level degrees, of which MFTs are one, are the degrees that most employers actually want to hire the most. So those are the degrees that are growing the fastest, that are being hired the quickest.
Yep. Should we talk about accreditation right now, Tony?
Yeah, I could answer that. There was a question about WASC earlier, right? This is Giselle. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Asked, how far reaching is the WASC accreditation in the US? So WASC does what's called academic accreditation. And so what they do is they give a university or graduate program a seal of approval to operate and hand out master's degrees or doctoral degrees, or even college degrees as well. WASC is for the Western United States, but it is what's called a regional accreditor, and it's recognized across the whole country. So the quick answer to your question is it reaches from coast to coast. And so you'd be totally fine at any WASC school. Was there another?
WASC, this is a clarification that it took me a while to figure out. Like, WASC is accrediting the university itself. Then there's program specific accreditation, and that's what CACREP and COAMFT is. And so somebody had a question, what's the difference between accredited by COAMFT and CACREP? This is go for it.
If you want to break it all, you've been answering all the questions just to give you a little.
No, this is good. You are
I can actually answer this one.
Yeah, no, you are. Go for it.
Unlike a lot of the others. So COAMFT is the organization that accredits marriage and family therapy programs that meet the criteria of the American Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. CACREP is the kind of parallel organization that accredits programs that meets the standards of the Association of Counselors. MFTs and counselors are two different kinds of therapists. They're both master's level therapists. They typically take the same amount of time to get through school. It's usually 2.5 years or so. They both need roughly the same amount of client contact hours, same amount of classes, same amount of so on and so forth. They both roughly earn the same amount of money, roughly speaking. And somehow they've ended up in separate guilds or camps. And, we could spend an hour talking about, it's a big political history behind that, which, it is not worth going into. But I know MFTs that are really, really good therapists, and I know counselors that are really, really good therapists. And if you sat down with either one of them for an hour, you would not be able to tell which is an MFT and which is a counselor.
Yeah.
The only way you would know is if like you study their resume very carefully. And so in terms of being a better therapist, I would say there's no difference between an MFT and a counselor, COAMFT, KCREP. And even COAMFT, I would say, or KCREP does not make you a better therapist. They're just saying you went to a school that meets their standards, for what that's worth.
And a lot of MFT programs are both COAMFT and KCREP accredited. Yeah, like it's very much. So just to like simplify it, like basically accreditation means a program jumped through a series of hoops that will ostensibly churn out more pure marriage and family therapists or counselors. That's all it means. Some states take that very seriously. California does not. So that's what accreditation is. It, like Tony said, it doesn't, it's not about the quality of the school. It's not a way to determine the Ivy League of MFT programs. It's really not. It's a ridiculous bureaucratic like quirk, but it does become critically important in some states if you're trying to transfer your license there. So that's why I tell my coaching clients, like, if it's all the same to you, if you're looking at a bunch of schools and you could go to any single one, either any of them would make you happy, go for the one that's COAMFT. It's just going to make your life a little bit easier. But if the school you really want to go to doesn't have COAMFT accreditation and you don't want to go to a program that has COAMFT accreditation, it's only going to become a real issue if you are sure you want to transfer your license and you want to go to a state that doesn't accept a COAMFT accredited school like degree. Is that good on that, Tony?
Yeah, that's good. There's a similar question about which accreditation allows online therapy across the US. And accreditation actually has nothing to do with allowing online therapy. What the online therapy, the rules for that are determined by the state. And it's state by state by state. And it's opening up. Well, especially during COVID, it opened up a lot. And people have seen, wow, this works. And wow, this is a lot more accessible to people. And it's greatly increased the accessibility of mental health services. So we're in a trend towards allowing more and more online therapy and allowing for it to be reimbursed by insurance companies. But that's a state issue. It's not an accreditation issue.
Right. Jane, you asked, how do I feel about graduating from how do I feel graduating from a COAMFT program has benefited me? Okay, like realistically, so what that means that my program was it was KCREP for a long time, and then it also got COAMFT accreditation. What that meant for me, like tangibly as a student, it meant that instead of the state required 225 client hours I had to get to graduate, I had to get 500. And then 200 of those had to be relational. So on the one hand, it sucked because I had to stay in school like longer because I couldn't get all my hours. Whereas like my colleagues from other programs were done in like no time because they had less than half the hours I needed to do. So that sucks. However, the thing that I'm like, the silver lining, 200 of those had to be relational. So that meant that I had to do therapy with multiple people in the same system in a room. So that could be a family, it could be a couple. It could, I mean, it gets complicated, but we'll leave it at that. It's usually families or couples, not kids alone. That doesn't count for a relational hour. It has to be with multiple people in the room at the same time, and you're the therapist that's working with them, right? That, I was forced to do that. Not that I didn't want to, but I had to in order to graduate. So it meant that I ended up graduating with experience working with both families and with couples, which is, they're very different than working with just an individual. So I'm happy coming out of my program knowing, like, having had that experience, because I know plenty of my colleagues they graduated having only seen adult individuals, And so it's, intimidating for them to then start working with couples. But that's not to say people don't do it. It doesn't happen. That's just the silver lining of having gone to a co-MFT program. I also do have the security of knowing that if I wanted to go practice in a different state, chances are pretty good there's nothing really preventing me from doing that, no matter what state I want to go to. So that's it. But it didn't affect the quality of the program at all. That's basically how co-MFT has affected me in my life. All right, let's jump into, we had a bunch of questions about career changers and non-psychology undergraduate degree holders. First of all, I want to tell everyone who is a career changer, I was a career changer as well. And you will find that in large part, a lot of people in this field are career changers. This is a very common thing for people to like burn out in some field and be like, I want to be a therapist, and then join this field. So you are in good company. You will not be alone. It is a wide range of people who are in the programs and who are also in schools. Now, in the different programs, you will find that there are some programs that are very heavy on youngsters, people who are just coming out of their undergraduate degree and going straight into their master's. I've heard that about USC, and I've heard that about Mount St. Mary's. But then you have programs like Antioch, Los Angeles, which is designed for working professionals or people with families. So their class programs are really designed around being held at nights and weekends. So the age in those cohorts tends to skew a little bit older because it's mostly career changers. So yeah, just to say that, as far as if you didn't get a psychology degree in undergraduate, or it's been a long time since you were in undergraduate, that's totally fine. I want to clear up a misconception right now about MFT being like part of the psychology field. This is psychotherapy. MFTs are psychotherapists. Psychology, the field of psychology, is different and largely more academic. The field of psychotherapy is very much about being frontline, working directly with clients. If you've watched the YouTube video or kind of read some of the stuff on the site, you'll know that psychologists have to get a doctorate degree in order to qualify for the psychologist license here in California. MFTs, social workers, counselors only need a master's. That is because these are really considered the licenses are like working with clients. They don't do a lot of research. I mean, you can, like Tony was saying, like if it's something that interests you, there's plenty of like avenues for you to go, either doing research on your own, going on to get your PhD society, teaching at a university. There's lots of options for that. But this isn't like going to law school where your undergraduate transcripts like super matter and what you got your degree in. You're not expected to have demonstrated that you wanted to be a psychotherapist since you were 7 years old. That's not, no one's looking for that. No one cares. Instead, what you will find is, yes, a lot of the programs do put an emphasis on, they want to know that you did well in your undergraduate because it says that you're going to be a student who's going to make it through their program without a lot of handholding. You're able to do schoolwork. They want to know, it's helpful if you're a career changer and you've had documented work experience for many years. That's great. It means that you are able to be a responsible human in the workforce. It also means like whether maybe you took a long time off from work to raise a family. So you have life experience. You're going to be able to relate to a lot more clients than someone who went from high school to undergrad to master's and now they're getting their license. And the schools know that. The commissions know that. It's really about, you don't need to apologize for whatever your path was to get you here. You just need to like take a look at it and understand so that you can communicate it to in your application why your life experience has qualified you to make you a good therapist.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Can I
Oh yeah, jump in, please.
So Therapy is psychotherapy is one of the fields that it's like fine wine. Like it just gets better and better as you age. And I know people became therapists in their 50s, and their clients definitely don't hold it against them. If anything, their clients are like, "Oh, you must have life experience." Da 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 da. So like don't ever let career switching or your age be a barrier.
No, not at all. I mean, if probably most people know, but if you didn't know, because I kind of talk about it a lot more on the podcast, I guess. I used to be an actor. And so I was really intimidated that coming into this field, I wouldn't be taken seriously, because if you Google my name, you get a lot of comedy stripper pictures in Google Images. Turns out, if you're good at what you do, no one really cares. Your clients certainly don't. They think it's hilarious. I had a couple of clients come in and be like, "So I was watching Community." But it's not, it hasn't prevented me from doing what I want to do. It's definitely probably influenced how I see see this field and how I am in this field. But I think that's true for no matter what your life experience is. So yeah, if you're career switching, welcome. It's great. The water's fine.
Yeah, I got my degree in my mid-30s is when I graduated. So
yeah, I'm telling you, you'll find so many people like that. So yeah, do it. Can I apply to MFT programs with a BA in child development? Hell yes, you can. That's a great degree to have to apply to an MFT program, actually. My undergraduate degree was in English literature. So it really, it doesn't matter. But with some of the programs you're applying to, if you didn't have a psych undergrad degree or you graduated more than 7 years ago, there are some programs that will require you to do prerequisite courses. Like it's up to 4 classes, really. They're like abnormal psych and intro to counseling or whatever, just to prove that you are, you can handle the material, and to kind of bring you up to speed with the other people that will be admitting into the class. But that is typically not too hard. I had to do 4 classes to get into CSUN. I did them all online through community college. Super easy. Okay, so we had a bunch of questions from folks who already have a master's degree and are now wanting to think about MFT. This is a very, very thorny, complicated issue, and unfortunately not my area of expertise. So I'm not sure I have a lot to offer right now, but if you have a master's in, this was specifically somebody has a master's in school psychology. Do I need another master's? It depends. What you're going to need to do is probably contact the BBS and see how closely your school psychology curriculum matched up with the MFT curriculum. My guess is it's not going to be very close. Because at least at CSUN, those programs were 2 separate programs. So to become an MFT, yeah, you might actually be looking at having to get another master's degree, because one of the simple requirements to be licensed as an MFT in California is having to graduated with a degree in marriage and family therapy. How can I use courses from my MA in school counseling to meet requirements? This is program specific. So I would recommend contacting any program you're interested in applying to, speaking to somebody who knows what they're talking about, not like the salesperson, and asking are they willing to transfer credits from other programs to towards your MFT degree. For example, I know CSUN wouldn't do that, on almost any circumstances, but other programs are more open to it. So I definitely recommend trying that. Somebody says, I have a master's in psychology. How can I get on the licensure track without having to enroll in another master's program? This sucks. I am so sorry. If in case you didn't know, there is a difference between a master's in psychology and a master's in marriage and family therapy, master's in clinical counseling, master's, whatever they call it. And we're going to get into that in a second, what they call the different degrees. But if you just got a master's in psychology and the program was not designed to put you on a licensure track, you have a master's and that's great, but you're probably not going to be able to get licensed using that degree. You most likely are going to have to enroll in a master's program that is designed to qualifies you to sit for the licensing exam in one of those licenses. What I would recommend for you is same thing as the other question. I would take your transcript to some of the programs you're interested in getting an MFT degree from, explaining the situation and seeing if they're willing to transfer and how many credits they're willing to transfer or apply towards an MFT degree. But you will end up having to do those clinical hours, at least 225 while you are in that MFT program. Okay, so now we're going to talk about choosing a program. Whew, we are going to go for a very long time. I'm sorry about it. There are a lot of questions. Okay, should I look at no, I'm going to stop looking at the questions in the chat just for now. Sorry, guys.
Let me take the chat, Carrie, okay? And so you can do the other list, because I've been answering some of them there.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Okay, so
and can I just say one thing quickly? We've had some questions about specific schools, and we really don't want to discuss any specific school by name. So we're more, rather ask us kind of more general questions, and we're happy to answer them. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to dig into that in a little bit. That's a big question I get, is like, what is such and such a good program? What's the best program? And I will explain all of my thoughts on that in just a second. But so choosing a program, somebody asked PsyD versus LMFT. Okay, so just so you know, the LMFT, the Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist Designator, that is a license granted by the state of California. The state of California says you have to have at least a master's to get that license, to qualify for that license. You can have a doctorate and get that license. So you can go ahead and get your PsyD in MFT and get your LMFT, right? But you don't have to get the doctorate. You can just get your master's in MFT and still qualify to get the license LMFT. The difference between a PsyD and a PhD, the PhD is, go, you want to take this one?
Just do it? Yeah, so I have a PsyD instead of a PhD. And originally the PsyD degree was created, maybe 3 or 4 decades ago now, to be a more clinically focused PhD, which think of like an MD. Like when you go see your doctor, they're an MD, they're not a PhD. And the MD is a clinically focused medical degree, or if they want to get into medical research, they'll often get a PhD. So a PsyD is the equivalent of an MD, meaning it's for psychologists that want to spend most of their time face-to-face helping clients, which I did. So I didn't get as much research training. I didn't get as much time digging through the research, and it was more time talking about helping clients. Now, about 10 years or so after I got my PsyD, I decided I wanted to get into research. And I was able to do that by just partnering and basically finding mentors who I could learn from. And I learned enough to be able to do a bunch of research projects, which I was then able to publish. So the moral of the story is that it doesn't matter. The moral of the story is, if you get any of these degrees and you really are willing to work hard and try hard and connect with the right people, you can do almost anything you want throughout the field.
Yeah. I would say the biggest difference is for relative to us, to what we're talking about today. PhD programs, typically if you get accepted as a PhD into a PhD program, you're typically paid. You typically don't end up paying tuition, or you get compensated in exchange. You end up TAing as a teacher's assistant for undergraduate courses. Sometimes you teach undergraduate courses. You're a research assistant for your professors. When you're accepted into a PhD program, typically you are a working person, right? No,
there's no.
I mean, not for counseling. That's what I'm getting into.
No, not even for psychology, I'd say the majority of the
psych anymore?
Yeah, it depends on the program. If it's a state-funded program, but the majority of the programs are not funded.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and to get into a funded program, you definitely need a psychology undergrad, and you have to have like a 4.0 GPA, and you have to have like lots of research time and all that kind of stuff. So I'm guessing a lot of the people here are not looking into funded programs. They're looking into PhD programs where they have to pay. And that will not help you more than the MFT or the other degrees. You're just paying extra money.
Exactly. I want to clarify this point for folks who, like me, like when I was in undergraduate, that was something that I was considering, was going on and getting a doctorate in English literature. And at the time, what I understood, my understanding was that like if you get a PhD, then like you don't really have to pay for it, but it's really hard to get into a PhD program, but then you can be a professor and blah, blah, blah. So then when I came back to this and was going back to school, when I looked at the sticker price of the master's programs, and particularly like, you know, the PsyD programs, I thought, oh, well, like the PhD programs, I remember you can just like, you know, work through them basically, and they're free. I'll end up doing that. I think there's like maybe 4 PhD positions for counseling in like this like nation. Like there's not a really typical thing. And apparently not even like it's less of a thing than I even thought it was.
Yeah,
So.
I mean, the one reason that I can think of, if you really want to teach at the doctoral level, then you need a PhD. Sure.
Yeah.
If you really want to do research like right out of the gate, then you should be going for a PhD program. But then you also like, you know, you have to have a perfect GPA and all that kind of stuff as well. So yeah. I'm guessing most of the people here want to be therapists one way or another.
Yeah. I'm hoping that that's true. So then it comes down to, is a PsyD better than the master's? Like, is it better getting a doctorate than getting a master's? So for the doctorate, you can get compensated. Sorry, hold on. We are having like, I'm getting like sound effects.
And let me answer that for a second.
Yeah.
So I mean, with a PsyD, there's a few cases where sometimes you can get paid a bit more. Sometimes you can do a few things like assessment or testing, which you can't do with the master's. But the majority of the time, it's not really going to help you more. And in fact, there's some jobs that won't hire you at the doctoral level because they don't want to pay the extra amount. So you actually have more job options at the master's level. So I really encourage people to get the master's unless you're very specifically aimed at a very specific niche that requires a doctorate.
And most clients don't care or know the difference. Once they look at all the letters after your name, like they don't know what it is. It's up to you to educate your clients like what your background is. But clients are not looking necessarily for a PsyD. Somebody asked, I'm currently not a candidate for a PsyD or PhD program, but pretty certain I'll want to eventually receive a doctorate. What's the best type of MA program to apply to that leaves my options open? Again, if you're still thinking about getting a doctorate after everything we just said, essentially you're going to want to be going from a counseling, like an MFT master's program, and then you'll be looking for a PsyD program that is in marriage and family therapy, counselor education, something like that, because there is some chance there that those credits can transfer. But again, not really worth it. Collecting hours for master's level licenses and doctorate licenses. Yeah, I'm not gonna dig into this topic, but just to let you know, when you start collecting your hours as an MFT, you're collecting hours towards the MFT license. If halfway through you stop and decide, actually, I want to go get my doctorate and I want to be a psychologist, you will most likely have to start over from scratch. This happened to a colleague of mine. None of the hours that you've done as your MFT are meeting the requirements for the psychologist license in California. So yeah, you will have to start over with those supervised hours from the beginning, most likely. Don't quote me on it, not area of expertise, but they do happen to know that. Is there a more streamlined path for someone who doesn't have the psych experience needed to apply to a doctorate program right now? Again, I feel like, not my area of expertise, but the PsyD programs that are focused on counseling, the things that are like gearing you up to get an MFT license, I really feel like, again, they are not so focused on you having psych experience, like working with clients. You can't work with clients without a license. They're not focused on you demonstrating a fascination with therapy from the time you started doing school projects. They're really looking at you as a holistic candidate. Okay, we had a lot of questions about these. What is the deal with the LPC MFT double track situation? So this goes back to our accreditation conversation earlier about CACREP and COAMFT. That's the counseling and the MFT accrediting situation. You will notice that some schools have both of those for their MFT program. And that's because there's so much crossover in California, what's required from the BBS in terms of a program from the counseling license and for the MFT license, that it's very easy for programs to tweak their curriculum just a little so that when you graduate, you could go down either path. If you go to just an LPCC program, like I think there's one at San Bernardino, Cal State San Bernardino, you are a little bit at a deficit because you haven't taken some of the courses required for the MFT. You can become a counselor, but if you want to then end up seeing children and families, you have to do a little bit remedial coursework, a couple extra courses, and then you also have to get some extra supervised experience to then qualify for the MFT license. Again, this differs state by state. This is the deal in California. What is the benefit? I have heard it described that like the benefit is literally you get to pay of getting 2 licenses is that you get to pay 2 separate times for these licenses. Again, clients don't really know what the difference is. Like therapists barely know what the difference is. So I've really not seen benefit to getting dual license. It might be easier again when it comes down to state by state, like portability. For example, if you're, I don't know, going to Tennessee, maybe it's an easier process to transfer your counselor license than it is to transfer your MFT license. And so you're able to do that and you just like forget about the getting licenses in MFT in Tennessee. That's something, but it's definitely, there's not really a benefit to the program. There's no benefit to being licensed as both. The difference between them really is that marriage and family therapists have done the coursework and done the supervised experience to prepare them to work with couples, families, and children. Tips, general advice for those interested in joint programs. They're great. Like they're great. Do them, don't do them. I wouldn't say that the joint track is really a huge selling point or a huge advantage of any program. But unless you want to be around, or unless for some reason like getting both those licenses is really important to you, then great. But I wouldn't go out of your way to try to get into one of those joint programs. Okay, I'm going to clear up some questions about the names of degrees. There is no difference between an MA and an MS. I mean, there is some arcane technical difference in terms of what classes are offered and how they're offered and that sort of thing. But a Master of Arts versus a Master of Science does not indicate really the kind of program you're going into. And the BBS certainly doesn't care. The difference between the Master's in MFT and a Master's in Counseling. Again, no difference, not really. I mean, so based on what courses are included in the curriculum, universities have different standards or ask departments to name the degree something different. My program just went through this for the longest time. It was a Master's of Science in Counseling, Option in Marriage and Family Therapy. And the university asked our department head to change it, tweak the curriculum to the point where it could be a Master's of Science in Marriage and Family Therapy, because it's clearer. It's better marketing, it's better advertising. That's what it is. You'll notice that a lot of MFT programs are an MA in Clinical Psychology, an MA in Counseling Psychology. They come up with all kinds of creative names. Also, Marriage and Family Therapy is a pretty common one. It matters less the name of the degree. Really what matters is, has the BBS in California, has the BBS approved that program as a degree granting program for the license you're seeking? As long as it says somewhere on the website, this program prepares students for licensure as a marriage and family therapist in the state of California. As long as it says that somewhere, that's a great license to get, or a great degree to get. It doesn't matter, MA, MS, anything, any of the other stuff. Specializations. So you will notice that some programs offer specializations. The questions that I got here are, what are the best ones? Should you do it in grad school or afterwards? And do MFTs need special training to work with kids and adolescents? So the deal with specializations is some of the MFT programs do try to differentiate themselves by offering these specializations. If you have a specific intense interest that you already know about, you might enjoy one of the programs more than just standard boilerplate program if you're able to get a little bit more hands-on with that specialization. But the reality is that the BBS has required so many units for just like the basic MFT curriculum that most schools don't have the resources to offer much beyond the bare minimum. This results in a lot of the program's curriculum being exactly the same as each other's. Now, some places will offer these specializations. At most programs, I would say these specializations they're offered are like a couple weekend seminars focused on trauma or something. There are some exceptions. For example, CIIS in San Francisco, their MFT program actually breaks out into very specialized, like separate track programs. Like I think it's the only one, to my knowledge, it's the only program that has a drama therapy program. So you're becoming an MFT, but the whole program is focused on becoming a drama therapist. Another one is Azusa Pacific. Last I checked, Azusa Pacific, when you graduate from their MFT program, you graduate with the Gottman Level 1 certification. This is a couples counseling certification. A lot of therapists, couples therapists will actually get that certification, pursue that after graduation. So oh, good, it is true. Thanks, Nicole. So yeah, it's a great thing coming straight out of school, having that certification in couples work right out the bat is great. I don't know why more schools don't do some manner of that. But the reality is most therapists do pursue specializations after graduation. And you're not expected to specialize while you're in grad program. It's just kind of like a little extra perk. But once you come out of your graduation or graduate program, that's when you can really start diving into the different specializations that are available. And there are so many different certifications you can get in different things, trauma, different like ways of working, different populations, whatever. Do you need, in terms of special training to work with kids and adolescents? No, your graduate program is expected, like that's part of what's built into the curriculum is to teach you how to effectively work with kids and adolescents right away. So you don't need any special training, but there are a lot of specialization, concentration certificates you can get to like make you even better at that after graduation. Okay, somebody asked Cal States, are they all evidence-based practice programs? And if this is your question, please tell me in the chat why you asked this question, because this is like a hot button issue for me. I'm not sure what you mean by this question, but I have an idea. Because there is a huge misconception in the field, let alone like people getting into the field, about what an evidence-based practice is. So I want to clear this up for you right now, because this drove me crazy the first year of my graduate program. I had no idea. So evidence-based practice is a term for what like all the professional organizations have said we as therapists should be doing. This is probably like the best way we've found to do therapy. APA, MFT, everybody believes this is what you should do. I have heard it described as a three-legged stool. And so each of these three parts are equally important. It takes into account the best available research evidence, your expertise as a counselor, and the client's context, preferences, values, that kind of thing. Incorporating all three of those things in your practice as part of like the fabric of how you work as a therapist is considered evidence-based practice. A misconception is that evidence-based practice means you are only looking at research evidence to treat clients, and that's not what it is. You will hear, I think a more appropriate term is empirically supported treatment, empirically supported practice. That means that you are using treatments that have empirical support in the literature, that have been research studied, documented that it works for this population, not that population. So I think the Cal States sometimes get a reputation for being a little bit more academic, and I think that they are. And I think that has to do with the fact that the people who become professors at Cal States are in large part doing it because the benefits are great from the state as a professor. And they have a real love for like the academic side of therapy. And they're really into the theory and research and that kind of stuff. So there is actually also a requirement as a tenure track professor at Cal States that you do need to publish. And I am not sure if other programs require that of their professors. But so Cal State's got this like reputation, and it doesn't mean, I'm wondering if you mean like, is this like cold kind of program, or like not touchy feely? Yes, there is some difference in the personality of programs for sure. I've heard it described that like CSUN's kind of like right in the middle. Something like Alliant is more on the like teaching to the test, like focused on information, but like Antioch is over on the touchy feely side. My colleagues at Antioch who I did my fieldwork site with, a lot of them didn't have to do an academic paper throughout their entire time at Antioch. I had to do an academic paper in every single class, but we're not talking about like intense research or anything. There is an emphasis to some extent on like the evidence base and going to the evidence base. At least there was in my program. I can't speak to all the Cal States, but so that's evidence-based practice versus whatever other people say. It bothers me a lot.
Can I
Yeah.
jump in here?
Yeah.
So look, I mean, we all become therapists because we want to help our clients, right? And that's the whole goal of training, is to help you get better at helping your clients. So, if you want to have a little bit of fun with it, when the program says they're an evidence-based program, go ahead and ask the admissions person to see the data of the clients that the trainees have been helping. Or ask the faculty. I just like to see the data from the clients that you've been helping. Since you're evidence-based, let's see the data. And they're going to give you a very strange look because they don't have that data. None of them keep track of the data from the clients they're helping. They're talking about randomized clinical trials, which they didn't do. They read about in some paper, that was done 20 years ago across the country. And so there's a number of us that promote what's called practice-based evidence, which means evidence from our private practice or from our agency, which is the evidence, the data from the actual clients that we have helped. And I keep my own private practice data on my website, drtonyr.com. I'll put it in the chat right now. And you can see examples of what I would consider to be valid evidence-based practice or practice-based evidence. And so the short answer is, don't let some program confuse you into thinking that somehow they're more sophisticated or they're more, they're somehow more scientifically valid or any of that kind of nonsense. I would go back to what I said at the beginning. We ask the program how many opportunities for rehearsing skills they will provide you. And ideally ask to see examples. Do they have videos of people rehearsing skills? Do they have examples of the exercises they will have you do? It's ideally deliberate practice exercises. And aim for the programs that offer the most opportunities for deliberate practice rehearsal. That's my speech.
Yep. Yeah, what Tony said. Seriously. It's so frustrating. Okay. Moving right along. Okay, we already talked about accreditation. We're not going to get into that. Now we are going to get into this part where I'm not going to name specific schools, and I'm going to tell you why. A lot of questions about what is the best program? What is the most cost-effective but best program in California? What makes a program better? How do we vet private versus public schools? What matters? Cost, prestige, real versus perceived quality. How can we tell the difference between reputable programs and diploma mills? How viable are online degrees? What are the best online schools? What are the best programs if you want to start a private practice? What to look for when researching the quality of the school? How to find the best education available? I love every single one of you who sent these questions. Because these were all the questions that were like going through my head when I was applying and could not find the answers. And it's because there's not a lot of answers to any of these questions. Tony, yeah, do you want to say something? Oh, okay, I thought you were raising your hand.
Go for it.
I promise I won't get us in trouble. Okay, so the best programs. First of all, there's no Ivy League of MFT programs. There isn't. It's a different field than like law or business, where your job out of graduate school really depends on like, you know, what network you had from your alumni network or like what program you went to. It's less academic, way more focused on practice and working with clients. So there really isn't a lot of reputation stuff. How do you figure out what a better program is? It really depends on what you individually mean by better. Is it that you want a more academic experience? You want something, a rigorous academic experience? Are you looking for a program that's going to make you the best therapist you can possibly be? Are you looking for a program that is going to help get you a job right out of school? There's a lot of ways you can parse best program. But I want to tell you this bit of history because I didn't know this and now I do, and it illuminated so many things for me. So in 2005, the Grad Plus loan became a thing, right? And when this became a thing, it meant that people who were trying to get master's degrees could borrow from the government, completely fund their education. Not only fund the tuition, but also get living expenses covered by these low-cost loans, right? What that did was it exploded the number of people who are seeking master's degrees, right? Because like, you know, trying to get a master's degree, you're trying to get a leg up on, you know, in the job market. So a master's degree looks like it gives you an edge over somebody who only has a bachelor's, right? So a lot of people started going back to school, getting their master's, and the schools are suddenly reaping the benefits of all of these people wanting to get into master's programs, and they have all this money to pay for it. So the schools, I mean, this is not a bad thing. This is nothing against the schools. They'd be dumb as institutions if they didn't take advantage of this. But so the more master's programs they offer that aren't really like resource intensive to the university, the more they can offer, the more money they can make. So you see an explosion of master's degree programs. You've seen this, I'm sure, if you're like me on Instagram, you will see like advertisements for like, get your master's in business ecology and social media, and like, you know, it's like designed to make your resume stand out, I guess. It happens that in most states you actually need a master's degree, but only a master's degree, to become a therapist. So like, this is a great way for schools to make money in states where you need to get a master's degree to become a therapist. So a lot of schools started offering master's degree programs. Does this mean they're bad programs because the universities want to take advantage of government money? No, it doesn't. But it does mean that there's also a lot of for-profit programs in the game because it's good money. I would say that like that is that's why it's so hard to say, is it a good program? Is it a bad program? Is it a diploma mill? Is it not? Most of these programs are going to graduate you, right? So you could consider them all diploma mills in some way. But there are for sure nuances between the different programs that will affect your experience in those programs. I'm going to pause here and see if Tony wants to weigh in on anything I just said, or shall I keep going?
I agree with everything you're saying so far. I'll start waving.
Yeah, okay. All right, sounds good. Okay, sounds good. I love it. So some of the things to consider for sure is figure out what best school means to you. What would make a program a really good program for you? Some of the things to consider, and this is the biggest problem I've seen, is some schools do not offer their students a whole lot of support around getting a field site. And this is a problem because you have to get 225 hours in order to graduate. And if your school isn't helping you find a place to get those hours, you're kind of just like left on your own to do it. For some people, not a problem. If you're a self-starter, you're really used to applying to jobs, this is not going to be hard for you. Especially if it might be hard for you if you live in an area where there aren't a lot of training sites. But if you live in a major city, you're going to be fine. But if you've not had a lot of experience applying to jobs, if you are in a more rural area, it might be harder for you to find a training site where you can get all your hours. And if you're at a co-MFT school, it might be super hard for you, because remember, you're going to have to get this specific little category of hours called relational hours, and that's working with families or couples. And those can be hard for trainees to get sometimes, hard for all therapists to get. But so the school ideally should be able, if you ask them, what kind of support do you provide your students around getting a field site? Ideally, they say, oh, well, we have contracts, we've established relationships with all of these sites. Here's the list. You can look them up. A lot of schools do this. A lot of schools make it available. CSUN did, USC's is online somewhere. So you can see what field sites students have already gone to, what field sites the school has a relationship with already. More likely what you'll get is like a dodge kind of question, like, oh, the list is being updated. I just heard this from a client yesterday. Sure, maybe it might be being updated, or it's just not there because the school doesn't care to keep records about that kind of stuff. They just leave it up to the students to figure out their own field site and earning hours. But that is one of the things that I have found is a big differentiator between programs. Does that mean that academically the rest of the program is shit if they don't support you finding a field site? Not necessarily, but I think it does indicate a less attention paid to the student experience. So that's one thing that you can really look at. And the other thing is, like, the thing that Tony has alluded to is, what kind of training are they giving you? The reality is the BBS does not require any type of specific type of training in order to graduate people who can eventually sit for the MFT license. They require specific classes, names of classes, and like what you teach in the class didactically, right? But not training. That is not required, like that's not described or defined. It's just assumed you're going to get that by virtue of having done these clinical hours. So some programs wash their hands of it and leave it at that. Some programs offer the classes that you need, tell you to go get your own field site, and expect that the field site's going to like train you on how to be a therapist. Yes, you are required to have a practicum class in your graduate program, but again, it's not defined what needs to be in, what you need to be taught in that practicum class. So some schools will take a more responsible, I think, approach towards making sure their trainees are actually trained in how to do therapy. Others, not so much. So when Tony is saying, like, ask them, how do they, what kind of experiential exercises do trainees do? How do trainees get trained in therapy skills before they, go on to see clients? What kind of framework or support system is there in the actual program to support training of actual clinical things instead of just like foisting you off on your field site? So that's another thing that leads to quality. And I would say the third big thing that kind of feeds into this best question is, this is a very word of mouth field, very network heavy. It's very much like the good jobs don't make it to Monster and Indeed. And somebody actually asked that somewhere, that that was a question about what website do jobs get posted on. Honest to God, like Monster or Indeed, that's where a lot of jobs get posted. You can check out prelicensed.com. They used to post job listings for associates exclusively. But yeah, pretty much that's it. So if you're not gonna, if the bad jobs are the ones being posted, how are you gonna get the good ones? And that's by availing yourself of the network that you build while you're in school and at your field site. So this has historically been one of the slight advantages of an in-person program over an online program, in my experience, at least. I did not go to an online program. I went to an in-person program to CSUN. I did my field work at a low-cost community clinic in Los Angeles called the Southern California Counseling Center. So both of those were in-person experiences, obviously, until COVID. But what I saw and experienced certainly was at my in-person program, I formed a lot of relationships with my colleagues and also professors. which kind of started to build my professional network. I went to my field site where I was exposed to a whole other sphere of like professors, supervisors, that kind of thing. And what happened at that training site a lot was that trainees would be supervised by volunteer supervisors who were maybe like just trying to give back to the community, or, you know, they wanted access to the trainings at SCCC, but they also had a private practice on the side. So when that trainee graduated, they already had a good working relationship. Often that trainee would get hired as an associate into that former supervisor's practice and then continue the supervisory relationship. That happened a lot. There is in the therapist Facebook groups a lot of like, you know, I'm looking for associates or I'm looking for a supervisor. So you get a lot of that. The in-person programs, and this is again just by virtue of geography, it's been a little bit easier to like build out that network. If in an online program, you're so like dispersed across the state, right? And the program itself doesn't have any roots in the area, in any area, let alone your area. So it can be harder to build on that. Now, that's really only if the online program itself is not making it a priority to develop a network with you, for you, whatever. If an online school is going through the trouble of like acknowledging that this is tough and giving you like separate, like other ways to support you in building a professional network, awesome. I think as we move more towards telehealth, I think a lot more programs are going to be moving online. There for a long time was this like stigma that like therapy is not an online thing. You couldn't possibly learn how to do therapy online, but COVID like exploded all of that. And it's just not true. It's simply not true. You can learn how to do therapy online. But yeah, if you're considering, so I want you to understand that I'm not saying in-person programs are better. They just offer certain advantages. So if you're considering an online program, or if you're in the position where your only option is an online program, ask them also, like, what do they provide in terms of support for students, in terms of building networks, in terms of like employment after graduation, those kind of questions. And again, if you are the kind of person who's had a lot of life experience building networks, if you're a self-starter, if you're an extrovert, you're probably not going to have a hard time doing this on your own. But I recommend doing it like starting now and starting as like going full at it while you're in school. A lot of the connections that I made happened while I was in school. A colleague of mine and I started a podcast, and we invited on anyone we really wanted to talk to, like Tony. And from there, we ended up building relationships with people that had nothing to do with either our program or our field site. So that's my very long-winded answer about how there is no answer to the best school question. Moving right along. Oh yeah, Tony.
So I just answered a question on the chat, which is to this. Something you can do is ask the admissions people if they can put you in touch with a student.
Yes.
Who's in the last year of the program or just graduated, ideally a few students, and you're going to hear the best review, like with all the, you know, guts and warts, and, you know, the most honest review is going to be from the students, because they're going to tell you, you know, what's really happening. And the admissions people, you know, they know what's supposed to happen, but they don't know what's actually happening. And if the admissions people are not willing to put you in touch with some students, like that's a bad sign, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and that's just on that note too, that's a really good point, Tony. So like, there are some programs that are incredibly well funded. As you can tell by the tuition they charge, they're very well funded. They have a lot of people available to answer a lot of questions. Often they're not actually people who work in the department. They just work for the university, admitting people into their program. And you will find quickly that these people do not have answers for your questions. Sometimes, hopefully, they will put you in touch with someone who's actually a professor in the department, somebody who's an administrator in the department who actually does know the answer to these questions. On the other hand, if you try to like reach out to a lot of the Cal States, especially right now during the summer, you're going to get crickets because they don't have any money to pay anybody to do anything that isn't necessary. And everybody's on vacation for the summer. So it's like, it's not that the Cal States don't care about these things or they don't want to get you this information. It's that like they're particularly well funded, so they're literally not working right now. But it's tough. It really is tough. I encourage you to just know, you should know, I've soapboxed about this the last time. I'm not going to get hugely into it again, but you should know that a lot of programs do employ admissions officers that are salespeople. Like their job is to enroll and admit students. And so if it seems weird that you're talking to somebody who can't answer basic questions about the program, that's why. Again, it's not criminal. It's not bad. It just sucks because they're being presented as like somebody who is knowledgeable about the program and is like going to partner with you to get you into the program. And that's not really what's going on all the time. So, and this is across the board. This is like happens at like strip mall schools. This happens at online diploma mills. It happens at USC. Like it's, you know, it just means that the school has a framework or structure in place to try to drum up applicants. So there's that. All right, let's dive into, I have 2 more categories and then we can burn through some questions if people feel like staying over. Practicum fieldwork and applying to an MFT program. So practicum sites, we've already talked about a lot. So how do you know if the program will assist with getting supervised hours during and after the program? Ask them, ask them, ask them, ask them. Just like Tony said, honestly, most programs offer no assistance in getting supervised hours after graduation.
Yeah, and when Carrie's saying ask them, the them you should be asking are the students.
Oh, yeah.
The admissions people will tell you kind of what they've been told, but they are not in any way connected to the actual process, and whatever they were told might have changed over time. So the students will know very clearly how much support they got, and you can ask them just to describe the support they got. I mean, were they just given a list and said good luck, or was someone talking with them every week about it? So
yeah, exactly. And they will be able to ask the student to describe how they got their field site. How did they pick it? Did they have options? That kind of thing. Some schools, some of the MFT programs, you don't have options. This is baked into the thing. You go straight into the center that is associated with the school. End of story. Others, much different. You can be told, some schools do nothing. They don't even have a list. They just say, go find a training site. Good luck. My school, CSUN, again, because they have like professors doing administrative stuff because they have no money. When we had to start searching for our field site, we got a list of, sites that are already established paperwork with the school. But then, and they had a fair one day. There was one day where they had a meeting, and maybe like 6 or 7 representatives from different field sites like came through and pitched their site. And you can ask questions. But then it was like, go find it, find your job. Now in our practicum class, our professor who was doing our practicum class, very hands-on in helping support us through the process. Dr. Stevens, shout out, really awesome, did the best support that they could. But like at Pepperdine, I heard from a professor there that like they actually have somebody on staff whose job it is for the people in the full-time Pepperdine program, the day program. Their job is to sit with students and get an idea of what kind of field site experience do they want to have and what are they interested in, and helps them actually apply to these sites. I don't think it makes it easier for them to get placement sites necessarily. I don't think that's what you're buying. I think you're buying somebody to like help you through the process. But that's what it is. You really can go get an idea of what kind of what a training site is, what's out there, by finding any schools, MFT programs in your area that actually do have a list that you can find online somewhere of practicum sites, and just start looking through them. If you go to any low-cost community clinic's website, there typically will be a drop-down menu for training, and it will tell you what kind of trainees they accept. So like for example, there's it's not Airport Marina. There's a training clinic in Santa Monica here in LA, in the LA area. that they are a training clinic and they have a training program, but they only accept people who are pursuing psychology licenses. But for example, at my clinic, they'll accept pretty much everybody. So not like you just sign up and go. You do have to go through an application process and get selected. It's just like getting a job. But yeah, it's easier. So what should students be aware of when choosing a practicum site? A lot of things to take into consideration, because you're trying to like serve a lot of masters with this like practicum thing. You're trying to get the hours you need to graduate. You're trying to, if you're at a co-empty program, you need to make sure you're getting the correct categories. So you're getting individual client hours and you're also getting relational. And it's a quirk. You don't need to get any individual if you're at a co-empty program. You could do all relational if you wanted to, but you're trying to form relationships with supervisors. You're trying to expand your experience. You're trying to develop a specialty if you know what you want. You're trying to pick a specialty. It's very complicated. And then it's not complicated. It's like there's a lot that rides on it. And then also there's people will tell you don't like you're going to have bad supervisors. So just get used to it. Just get through it. Get the experience. Make the best of it. And people don't want you switching practicum sites a lot. We were very much forbidden from switching practicum sites. It's kind of like once you got one, then you like stuck it out there. So the variety of options you have, it depends on like what's most important to you. For me, I wanted to get an understanding of what it would be like in private practice. So I picked a training site that kind of mimics the private practice atmosphere. At Southern California Counseling Center, it's very much like it's just a building with lots of rooms in it. And I would get my assignment of clients, my client load, and I would be responsible for going there, getting them out of the waiting room, taking it to my assigned room, having our session, doing our paperwork, writing notes, all that kind of thing. There are other options than that kind of a setting. For example, a lot of my classmates did school-based settings. So a lot of, especially in LA, big city areas, the public school districts will partner with MFT programs and have the MFTs come into the schools. And so that is a lot more like an agency job. You're there for like 15 to 30 hours a week. You are seeing student after student after student, your liaison, a little bit of case management with parents, that kind of thing. You can do something super specific, like there are certain agencies that focus on children under 5. And so if you want to work with really young kiddos, great experience to get. And you'll get your child and family hours. But if then you come out of that experience and that has been the majority of your experience. So if you really wanted to work with couples, that's kind of a limiting field site to end up at. It really comes down to what kind of experience do you want? What's most important to you? Is it just getting the hours and getting out? Awesome. If it's networking, if it's specialty experience, that kind of thing. Tips for finding a supervisor. I'm not sure if this question was about field sites or after graduation. So I'll kind of address both. You usually just get assigned a supervisor as a trainee at your field site when you're in graduate school. You don't really get to pick much of anything. Again, changes from site to site, but there it is. You do obviously have more options once you've graduated. If you're deciding to go into private practice and you're looking for a supervisor to employ you, then it really becomes about like finding a good fit. If you're going into a community agency setting, you are typically also just assigned a supervisor. You don't really get to pick one.
Carrie,
yeah,
I'm just noticing the time. We've gone almost 2 hours here.
Oh my God, I know. I could keep going.
And so we should cut it off at 2 hours, or else we're going to be violating some kind of California labor law issue or something.
You got it.
So this would be like a sweatshop. Like the Zoom sweatshop. So just, pick your, top last few questions, but let's then wrap it up.
All right. Let's see. What do I have? Is it possible for students to complete 1,300 hours during graduate school? It's possible. It's not easy, and most people don't. It's that 1,300 hours is in the state of California. The upper limit to how many hours you can count towards your license that you accrued during graduate school. Most people don't, unless something happens and you happen to stay in school for a really long time. Typically, people get around 225 to 500 hours. Okay, the last category here is applying to MFT program. Resources you can use to prepare for graduate school. Like I said, there are some schools who have prerequisite course requirements. Those are great, do that. If you are rusty, that it's great to do like a, just, you know, whatever on the free available courses in psychotherapy or counseling that they look interesting to you, but you don't need a whole lot of preparation. Books, textbooks. I've got a list. Oh, if you go to verybadtherapy.com/bookshelf, I have a list of all my favorite books, therapy books. Read any of those. YouTube channel. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're going to be posting more videos, podcasts. There's a lot of therapy podcasts. I recommend checking those out. Highly recommend the Very Bad Therapy podcast, hosted by yours truly. Good tips to prepare for applying to graduate school. Figure out what kind of experience you want. Figure out what kind of candidate you are. Take a look objectively at your application materials, your transcripts, your work experience, your letters of rec. Figure out where there's holes in your application. Like, where are things that you have to explain? Where are things that you have to like make up for? And then those are the things you're going to want to address in your essays or in an in-person interview if it comes up. If you had a pretty bad academic record in undergraduate, please don't let that be a deterrent. A lot of the schools do have a requirement, a GPA requirement to apply, but then they'll say in fine print, like, but like if sometimes exceptions are made. So don't let it be a deterrent. If you already, we already talked about that. Oh, this is a great question to wrap everything up. What kind of work or jobs can one get before and during grad school that can help build resume as MFT? Somebody else asked, should I get experience in ABA, which is applied behavioral analysis, or service with special populations before applying? The reality is that, like, because it's, you know, mental health professionals are licensed practitioners, you actually don't have a lot of options to get direct counseling experience. So it's really not required to apply to programs. Does it look better if you've got some volunteer experience with populations you might end up wanting to serve, or crisis counseling volunteer experience? Yeah, it looks great. It looks like you have thought about this beyond just like a dream of being a therapist one day. I highly recommend volunteering with Crisis Text Line. That's crisistextline.org, text like texting on your phone. It's crisis counseling, so it's not therapy, but it will give you exposure to a lot of the different kind of conversations that come up in therapy without it being as like intense as a suicide hotline, which I think can be a little much for people who are just going into the application process. So, okay, that's it. Is there anything, Tony, from the chat that we should hit?
I think we've touched on most of the comments or questions in the chat. I want to thank everyone. Yeah, I mean, there's just been a ton of really good questions, and we're going to be able to post this on YouTube, and it's going to help a lot of people in the future. So thank you everyone who submitted questions. I really appreciate it. And we're obviously going to have to do another one of these because there are more questions. Yeah, it's really exciting to see so many people that want to become therapists, or at least considering it. It's a wonderful career. I feel so lucky, you know, being a therapist. I mean, it's incredible that you get to do this job that's so meaningful and then get paid for it as well. So I really encourage you to, you know, consider it and pursue it. Yeah.
Yep. I feel the same way. And I really want to just emphasize this for those of you who are career switching out there. It was the scariest move I ever made, and also the best decision I ever made. So I hope that you embrace it and come join us on the dark side. But thank you all for joining us today. And we look forward to being in touch with you soon.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.